This episode, we're going to talk about the best $200 suspension upgrade you can do that most people don't even think about. Welcome to Off Camber. This episode, we're going to talk about suspension bushings, and we're going to talk about rubber bushings versus polyurethane bushings, and the difference in the way they work and the performance you get from them. Plus, we're going to dispel the myths that they always squeak no matter what you do. Then once we're done in the studio, we're going to come back down to the shop and I'm going to install them in the control arms for the Miata. I'm going to do it with basic hand tools, stuff that you can get for under 50 bucks all in, so that you can save yourself hundreds of bucks on a mechanic and you don't have to have a hydraulic press. So let's be honest here. Are you sick of your car sounding like an angry maraca full of loose change every time you hit a bump? Does steering the car feel like a vague suggestion rather than an actual command? Does your car have ideas of its own when it hits bumps? If so, it's probably not those expensive coilovers you just slapped on the car. It's the thing you forgot. The suspension bushings. So those bushings that you don't think about? Well, they're sacrificial little pieces of rubber that give their lives to make sure that your car drives and steers exactly the way it's supposed to. So let's talk about the what and the why. What are suspension bushings actually? And the easiest way to think about this is kind of like cartilage and joints. They're the little bits of rubber that sit between two pieces of angry metal that are rotating. You'll find them in suspension parts, like lower control arms, on your sway bars, in your steering system, all over the place. And what they do is they go anywhere where there's two metal pieces that would otherwise be angry and beat each other to death. So from the factory, these things are all rubber. It's because their first job is comfort. They're there to kind of isolate you from all of the bumps and vibrations that come from the suspension and to keep the metal parts from kind of beating each other to death. So suspension bushings aren't just for comfort. They allow the suspension parts to move in a very controlled and precise manner. For instance, in a double wishbone suspension like the Miata project we have, they allow the arms to move up and down like this over bumps. And it's going to control all sorts of things. It's going to control toe. It's going to control camber. It's going to control a lot of different things. So it's important that your bushings are in good condition. When they start to fail, things change. You start getting weird tire wear. You start getting weird behavior over bumps. You'll get camber or toe changes mid-corner, so the car becomes less stable in a handling situation. So these parts do wear out over time, and it's because they're constantly being squished, rotated, twisted, squeezed. Anything you can do to a suspension part, this bushing is taking that load. So in a rubber bushing, the sleeve where the bolt goes through and connects to the body of the car or the chassis of the car is bonded to the rubber, and that rubber twists around that. It doesn't move. The rubber itself flexes and twists. Some people will tell you that that sleeve moves. It doesn't, and if it does, the suspension's not tight, which is going to be another clunk altogether. Polyurethane bushings, on the other hand, have that center sleeve that gets pinched between the two tabs, and then the bushing rotates around the sleeve, and that's where the squeak comes from. So let's talk about the difference between rubber and poly bushings. OEM rubber style bushings, they're what your car came with. Their only selling point? Comfort. If you want soft, squishy, pliable rubber that eliminates noise and eliminates vibration, rubber bushings are for you. However, there's some downsides to rubber. They do degrade pretty quickly. Now, what I mean by that is they're susceptible to oil, heat, they deform, so they eventually crack, wear down, and fall apart. Basically like anybody that's ever gone to a Diddy party. Then you've got polyurethane or poly bushings. And these are a popular upgrade for enthusiasts. Why? Because they're basically the Chuck Norris of plastics. They're a tough, durable, synthetic material that will generally outlast the life of the car, usually. And that stiffness means way less flex, way less deformation, way less deflection, so you get sharper, crisper handling. So what's the catch with poly bushings? Well, the catch or the trade-off is that you're going to feel every single thing in the car. You're going to feel pebbles, cracks, changes in pavement, all that stuff. But it's going to be in a very direct and precise manner, and you're going to develop a relationship with the road surface. So switching to poly is always going to make the ride firmer. You can pick a softer poly or go all the way up to basically rocks in your suspension, and the choice is really up to you. But the thing about it is that you can develop a squeak if you don't install them properly. And by install them properly, I mean properly lubricating the bushings when you're installing them. So what bushing is right for you? Well, that really comes down to your personality and the personality that you want the car to have. Do you want a car that rides on a bunch of clouds, cruises down the street real nice and smooth and gets you point A to point B, but looks good with lowered suspension, rubber bushings are the way you want to go there. Do you want a little bit of a performance edge? Want the car to be more direct, have a better feel of the road, and be sharper on turn-in? Poly's your answer there. So how do you know that your bushings are shot? Don't worry, your car's going to scream it at you. The most obvious signs are clunks and knocks and noises every time you hit a bump. Another good sign, especially with control arms, is that you get a distinct vibration between about 50 to about 60 miles an hour. Next, you want to pay attention to what the car is saying to you. Is the steering not as direct? Do you steer into a corner and it kind of feels like it sets over and then goes? Does the car shudder when you hit the brakes, shudder when you accelerate? Chances are the bushings are worn out, or at least dried out to the point that they're really not doing their job anymore. The way you can confirm this is a really quick inspection. You can jack up the car, look underneath it, look for cracks, look at it if it's dried out. You can pretty much tell. If it looks like the rubber's drying up and falling apart, the bushing's probably no good. Another good test is when you jack the car up in the air, grab the wheel at 3 and 9 o'clock, shake it back and forth. If it moves a little bit, there's probably worn out bushings. There's a ton of different signs that are pretty easy to pick up on as long as you're paying attention. So now that we know how the bushings work, why don't we go down to the shop and go ahead and install a set. Now that we've talked about all the hows, whys, and whats around polyurethane and rubber, I'm going to show you guys how to install this stuff with just a regular set of tools. And what I've got here is a brand new set of Miata lower control arms. When I pulled the suspension apart on it, I found that there was problems, so I replaced the upper control arms. You can see I already pushed the polyurethane bushings into those. And now we're going to work on the lower front control arms. So these are brand new rubber bushings. It'll change a little bit with age. They get a little bit more baked in. Not too bad though. When we do the rears, we're going to knock out aged ones, unless of course the control arms are bent or broken like they were on the front. So what we're going to do here, we're going to take these bushings and we're going to push them out. Now, just so you know, you can use relatively simple tools. This is a gear puller from Harbor Freight. Comes in a set of 3 for 25 bucks. Super, super cheap. And we can use it to push these bushings out, no problem at all. So what I'm gonna do is use our friend heat, which you should have a torch laying around. We're gonna put them in our vise. And then we're gonna use our gear puller to drive them out with our impact wrench. So you'd be surprised how quick this goes. It's actually easier to do it here in the vise than it is to do it over on the hydraulic press that I've got over there. First thing we're gonna do is we'll spin this out, size it out to the control arm. Oh, wrong way. This upper control arm, or the lower control arms have a lot more area here, so I have to extend it almost fully. But this medium-sized gear puller seems to work just about perfect. Not gonna lie, I used the small one earlier on the upper control arms, and I locked this thing in here. The thread is just thrashed, and now I got to work on getting the socket out of it later. So you just want to get these sized up. They don't need to be huge. And then make sure that these are all tightened down, because it'll keep it nice and tight when you put it in there, so it'll hold it in place. And then we'll just slide that under. So first thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and heat this up. You don't need to do it for long. It doesn't need to turn bright red. Doesn't need to do any of that stuff. What we're going to do is just heat it until you start to see smoke coming out, without burning the rubber, obviously, but we see the rubber getting hot and starting to smoke. When that happens, we're good. So introduce our friend fire. All right, I'd say when the bushing starts catching fire, we're probably good. So what we'll do is get our little claw on here. You want to get the feet right up underneath that rubber lip. Trick is getting this thing sized in. There we go. Oh, control arm's hot. Hot things are hot, guys. All right, let's hold it down like that. Oh, twisty. All right. Before we ruin it, let's pull it back out. And ready? Just that easy. As you can see, we kind of shredded the old bushing a little bit because it had that little rubber bit that went in the Zerk fitting hole. So, yeah. All right, now we'll flip it. Control arm got warm. What you're doing actually is when you heat this casing up on the outside of the rod end, what we're doing is we're actually softening that bushing up inside and making it a lot more pliable. Any type of bond that was there, or any type of grime that has gotten in there over the years, even on old ones, is going to break away with heat. It's the same idea that you use on getting rusted bolts out and stuff like that. Heating it up kind of breaks away all the gunk. All right, so now let's press in our new bushings. And when I say press, I mean hand press our new bushings in. So I've got these white line bushings, and they've got specific sleeves for them. But something to keep in mind is there's big sides and little sides to them, right? And there's a front and a rear on each one. The instructions they sent list us out with a nice little picture in case you're like me. So that way we can push in the bushing the right way. So we know which one's the front, which one's the rear on the control arm, because it does make a difference. All right, I'm back with my nerd glasses so that I can see. What we're gonna do initially is we are going to lube the hole. And the idea is the same as kind of like packing a bearing, in that it's got this little cross hatching inside. All right, it's got that little cross hatching inside. And what we wanna do is try and fill, try and get grease in all of the cross hatching, because when we put the sleeve in, it's going to press most of it out. But we want enough so that it doesn't squeak, because this is where the squeak comes from. Because this bushing, obviously like we talked about in the studio, the center pin doesn't move at all. It locks between the tabs and locks in place, and then the bushing sits inside the control arm and spins around the sleeve. Just a nice thin little coat on the outside. We don't want to put too much on there. Doesn't much matter if it goes there or not. 16 goes in the front of the rear eye. So it's going to go in the front of the rear eye. And that does not want to stay in. Stay. Now in these ones, it feels like the bushing might actually rotate a little bit inside the control arm. So maybe make sure you grease the outsides too. Keep that squeaky from happening. And if you overdo it, you can just get some grease. Any auto parts store, just make sure that it's safe for polyurethane. All right, and we'll put that one in the top. And we'll take our sleeve, just put it right in there like that. And there we go. So same thing, we're just gonna load it up with grease. Another thing you wanna do is you kinda wanna put grease on the face of them, right here. And we'll do more of that when we get ready to actually install them in the car. Because that will keep any metal surface, any raw metal surface on this has a chance that it's gonna squeak. So that's why I like to kind of grease all of this stuff up, because then they don't make any noises and all the complaints people have about poly kind of disappears. Unless of course you're looking for that plush ride and you end up with a stiff performance ride, because it does get a little bit of vibration out of it. But to be honest with you, we're not going to pretend that the Miata rode like a Mercedes-Benz to start with. So all right, 13 in the rear of the front eye. Yes, I'm double checking a million times because I will mess things up if I don't pay attention. So that'll about do it for this episode. Next episode through, we're going to throw the full suspension on the car, get the wheels on it, get it actually on the ground. So I hope you enjoyed the episode today. If you like this kind of content, go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe. It helps the channel out, lets me know what you guys want to see. As you guys watch this episode, I'm wrapping up the Danger Ranger race out in Florida. Once we get back, we'll throw that episode up, and then we're going to get back to work on the Miata. Again, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'm glad you came. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Off Camera.